We've had a pretty incredible transfer window so far, and all of a sudden our squad is looking like one of the strongest we've had in many years. But even with our new additions, how did the current set of players match up against the stars of our greatest teams of the Premier League era? How many of this 2026 squad, if any, would get into the first 11 of a Harry Redknapp team or a Mauricio Pochettino team? I've selected two memorable matches under each manager. Our 3-2 win at the Emirates in 2010 and a 2-0 victory in the last ever North London derby at the old White Hart Lane in 2017. And I've compared the 11 players that started those matches against our current set of players to see if any of them could earn a spot in those starting 11s. And I have to admit, going so far back, I'd almost forgotten just how good those teams were. And so the results, as I see them, may surprise you a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions as we go through the teams player by player. So let's get started, beginning with the great Harry Redknapp team of 2010. What a game it was back on the 20th of November in 2010 when we came back from 2-0 down to win at the Emirates with goals from Gareth Bale, Rafa van der Vaart and the winner from Yunus Kabul. The team that started the game that day looks like this, and straight away you can see the incredible amount of quality and firepower that we had back then. The only odd selection for me was Roman Pavlyuchenko ahead of Peter Crouch. Now, I don't remember why Pav started the game that day, but ultimately, who cares when we ran out 3-2 winners on the Gooners home patch? And so who from our current squad gets into that starting 11? We'll start back to front, starting with the goalkeepers. From what I remember of Aurelio Gomez, I would call him a slightly better version of Vicario. He was an amazing shot stopper, brave when coming off his line, probably slightly better at dealing with a high ball into the box, but also capable of costly mistakes. And as for Antonin Kinski, although it's very early in his career, I think he proved at the back end of last season that he's a very capable and promising goalkeeper. He's a good shot stopper, he's brave, he's good at coming off his line, he's pretty good at dealing with the high ball into the box considering he's not particularly big for a goalkeeper. And let's not forget his incredible mentality coming back from that horrific night in Atletico Madrid to perform the way he did at the back end of last season. However, due to Aurelio Gomez's body of work, he had 2 seasons where he kept 12 clean sheets for us in the Premier League, not to mention across his whole career 16 clean sheets in 42 Champions League games. You have to say that at this point Aurelio Gomez retains the number 1 jersey. Moving on to the back 4, and I've got to be honest, I'm changing every single player. Pedro Porro versus Alan Hutton is an absolute no contest. I'd say that Andy Robertson definitely has more to his game than Benoit Assou-Ekotto, even though he's a very nice, neat and tidy fullback, but not much more than that. And although I thought Yunus Kabul was a pretty good player for us, he was a decent defender, but one who you could always rely on to make a mistake in a big game. Willie Gallas was a good defender, probably the best of those back 4, but we didn't have him in his prime. So the fact that he was also an ex-Gooner makes it very easy for me to replace him with Mickey van der Ven, who I still believe will develop into one of the best centre-backs in the Premier League. Moving into the midfield, and this is where things get a lot more tricky. That midfield 3 of Jermaine Genius, Luka Modric and Rafa van der Vaart, along with the brilliance of Gareth Bale on the left, were the main driving force behind the success of this team. And even though we've spent a hell of a lot of money upgrading our midfield this summer, do any of our new players get into that trio? Well, my answer would be yes, but only one of them. With Luka Modric, I don't think there's any argument there. Don't get me wrong, Mateus Fernandes has incredible potential. Rodrigo Bentancur is a really nice, technically gifted footballer, but Modric is one of the greatest midfielders of the modern game, and so unsurprisingly, he keeps his place in the team. Now, Rafa van der Vaart versus James Maddison is an extremely tricky one for me. They're slightly different types of number 10 or attacking midfielders, with James Maddison relying more on his dribbling, his movement, his creativity, his ability to run beyond the striker. Van der Vaart was quite a unique player. The guy basically couldn't run, but his anticipation of attacking situations was absolutely incredible. He had an absolute wand of a left foot and he was deadly in front of goal. In the 2 full seasons that he played for us, he got into double digits for goals in the Premier League. He got 13 in 2010-2011 and he got 11 in 2011-2012, not to mention 16 assists across those 2 seasons. Maddison's best season for goals and assists was 24-25, where he scored 9 goals and provided 7 assists. But let's not forget the fact that he spends a hell of a lot of time in the treatment room. And it's mainly for that reason, but also for the fact that Van der Vaart was such a leader in the team with a real determination and a will to win, that I think Van der Vaart keeps his spot at number 10. So the one change I would make is Sandro Tonali for Jermaine Genius. Now, Genius was a good midfielder and his return for goals and assists was pretty respectable. 21 goals and 15 assists in 155 appearances. Now, I'm pretty sure that Tonali doesn't provide a greater threat in terms of goals and assists. He's only scored 5 goals in 79 Premier League games for Newcastle, but as a general all-round midfielder, technically, the way he covers the ground, probably stronger, more physical. I just think he's a better all-round player. And also, something which is very important, he's far less injury prone. Genius was a bit of a sick note. Now, the front line's an interesting one, and I think straight away we can just get Gareth Bale out of the way. Putting him up against Mateus is an absolute no contest, and so Bale obviously retains his place on the left. For me, the greater discussion would be, who would you prefer out of Gareth Bale or Sonny on the left-hand side? Big debate. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. As for Aaron Lennon versus Mohamed Kudus on the right-hand side, this is a really close one. Lennon played 10 full seasons in the Premier League for Spurs, making 266 appearances. But amazingly, in those 10 seasons and all those games, he never scored more than 5 goals in a single season. His assist record was good though, 51 assists in those 266 games. But I always felt with Lennon, he was one of those players that never quite reached his full potential. He had amazing ability and he was absolutely lightning fast. And I just think with those attributes, should have chipped in with a few more goals. Now, Mohamed Kudus has only played 19 games with us in the Premier League, scoring 2 goals and providing 6 assists. But I think at the start of last season, he was definitely our standout player. And I think his long-term injury was one of the big reasons why our season went downhill so quickly. And even though I've got a lot of time and a lot of love for Aaron Lennon, he was a great servant to the club, I just feel that Kudus is probably the slightly better player. And next season, under the guidance of Roberto De Zerbi, I'm expecting some really big things from that guy. And so it's a very close call, but I'm going with Mohamed Kudus for that right wing slot. Now finally to the number 9, and this is a bit of an odd one like I mentioned earlier, because Pavlyuchenko started that game, but Defoe and Crouchy were both on the bench, and I'm not sure Harry's reasons behind that choice, I can't remember, but Pavlyuchenko is the player that I'll compare against. Now, even though it's pretty clear we're not blessed with the greatest strikers in our current squad, I'm just going to come out and say it. I think Dom Solanke is a better player than Roman Pavlyuchenko. Both players are fairly average in the grand scheme of things, but I just think actually Solanke, with his attributes, playing in that team would have been a really big hit. His pressing, his physicality, his ability to back into defenders, I think would be the perfect foil for the absolutely deadly Van der Vaart at number 10. But I would mention that if I had to choose between Peter Crouch and Dom Solanke, I'm taking Crouchy every day of the week. And so, of that team that won at the Emirates back in 2010, I'm taking 7 of our current players to move into the first 11. And that's pretty encouraging considering we finished 5th that season in the Premier League and got to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And now, the bar goes even higher. Let's move on to the 2017 team of Mauricio Pochettino. As I mentioned in the intro, I picked our last game at the old White Hart Lane Stadium against Arsenal, where we ran out 2-0 winners with goals from Dele Alli and Harry Kane. The team that day looked like this. You can see it's incredibly strong, but the only notable absentee would be Moussa Dembele. And by the way, if Dembele starts this game, there's no way I'm swapping him out for any of our current players because he was one hell of a footballer. And again, going from the back to the front, starting with the goalkeepers, I don't think there's any real argument here. I think that Hugo Lloris remains our best ever Premier League goalkeeper, and even though some mistakes started to creep into his game later in his career, he was still incredibly reliable. And Lloris arrived at the club with a reputation for being a sweeper keeper, which was basically the precursor to the modern day goalkeeper. Like I say, he was top quality for many years, and he deservedly won the World Cup back in 2018. Now, the defence for me is pretty mixed. However highly I rate Jan-Paul van Hecke and Mickey van der Ven, I think Jan Vertonghen and Toby Alderweireld were the perfect centre-back pairing. Jan Vertonghen provided the pace, the calmness, the incredible reading of the game, the incredible one-on-one defending. And Toby provided the aerial strength, the positioning and the range of passing of a top-class centre midfielder. They were an incredible combination at the back, and for me, undoubtedly our best of the Premier League era. Ben Davies in his prime was a very competent left-back. Pretty decent on the ball, quick, hard-working, good reading of the game. But I think even this version of Andy Robertson is slightly better than a prime Ben Davies. He's just got a lot more quality on the ball. And I don't think there's going to be any let-up in his work rate because he's just one of those sorts of players. And so for me, Robbo just shades it at the left-back slot. Now, the right full-back position is very, very tricky indeed because for me, Pedro Porro and Kieran Trippier, both in their prime, are very, very similar players. They're both very calm, both have a lot of quality on the ball, both good going forward, both good from set pieces, probably not the best defenders in the world, but players, fullbacks of high quality. For me, Pedro Porro just about shades it. I think he's very, very slightly quicker. And let's not forget, He's just won the World Cup with Spain and he was a real star of the tournament. And when you look at that combined back five, I don't think there's another Premier League team that can match that for balance and for quality. Going into midfield, and for me, two of these changes are quite straightforward. Tonali goes in for Victor Wanyama. I mean, Wanyama was a really good player. He had quality, very good in front of the back four, but he doesn't match up to Tonali's all-round game, and so that's quite an easy swap for me. And I think that even though Eric Dyer obviously plays a defensive role in this team, I would swap him out for either Mateus Fernandes or Rodrigo Bentancur. I mean, Dyer actually was a very, very good defensive midfielder. A better defensive midfielder than he was a centre-back, but in terms of midfield quality, I think both Fernandes and Bentancur offer a lot more. Moving on to number 10, and again, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Dele Alli, for 3, maybe 4 seasons, was an absolute revelation. A goal scorer, a creator, a player that played with real personality, who got the fans off their seat, flicks, tricks, assists, goals. He was a real leader in the team and also a player with a bit of a nasty streak, which I actually quite like, and I think all the top players possess that. He made 181 appearances for us, scoring 51 goals and providing 35 assists. Really, really good numbers for a number 10. But also, most notably, he would always turn up in the big games. He scored goals against Arsenal, Chelsea, Real Madrid. However, somewhat surprisingly, James Maddison's assist ratio is better than Dele Alli's. He's provided 17 assists in just 62 games, which is roughly 1 in 4, compared to Dele Alli's, which is roughly 1 in 5. He doesn't score as many goals, but he too has turned up in big games, notably against Manchester City on a couple of occasions. And when he's fit, he's basically our modern day leader and our modern day talisman. I'd also say that technically, and in terms of with the ball at their feet, Maddison is probably a better player than Dele Alli. He's just a bit more graceful, a bit more silky. However, for me, Dele Alli in his prime years was an amazing player, and a player that got the whole stadium off their seats. A scorer of big goals, a scorer of spectacular goals. And along with Sonny and Harry Kane, he was one of the main drivers behind that team's success. And so for me, Dele Alli retains the number 10 slot. Now, moving into the front three, it's an absolute clean sweep from Mauricio Pochettino's team, in my opinion. Sonny and Harry Kane are two of the best players we've ever had at the club. One on the left wing, one at number 9. And compared to the quality we've got there in our current squad, it's absolute night and day. Eriksen playing off the right is a little more interesting when you put him up against Mohamed Kudus, but actually, when he started his career, he did start as an attacking right-sided midfielder. He was very much in the mould of a player like David Beckham. He probably had a slight lack of pace, but incredible quality on the ball, a scorer of goals, dead ball specialist, provider of assists. And when you look at it, aside from the Laudrup brothers, he's probably Denmark's greatest ever footballer. A prime right-sided Christian Eriksen in his younger days, for me, is a much better player than Mohamed Kudus. And so the front three remains unchanged, meaning that only 4 of our current squad gets into that 2017 team of Mauricio Pochettino. And let's not forget that if Moussa Dembele was fit for that game and was playing in place of, say, Victor Wanyama, only 3 of our current players get into that first 11. And so, in summary, what does that tell us? I think it's 2 things. The first point is that although we have had a great window so far and brought in some really good players, our squad is still quite a long way off those brilliant squads, especially of Mauricio Pochettino and even Harry Redknapp. There's been a lot of overexcited talk online about guaranteed Champions League qualification and even some talk of a title challenge. I think that's extremely premature. Even though we've now got an amazing manager and some really good players, it's going to take more than one good transfer window to arrest the decline that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years. And secondly, I think it's plain for all to see. We're just not strong enough up top. Look at the attacking players we had during the Redknapp and Pochettino years. Bale, Son, Kane, even Lucas Moura, Fernando Llorente. Our current squad is extremely light up top, and unless we make a couple of signings before the season starts, I'm really concerned that we're going to be dominating games but not amassing the points tally that we deserve. Now, there's still a few weeks to go and I'm hopeful of more signings, so let's just see what Roberto De Zerbi and the board can come up with. Before I go, it's looking increasingly unlikely that we're going to be able to sign Junior Krupi from Bournemouth, and so the search for a new number 9 goes on. I made a video a few weeks ago looking at potential targets, and I still think they're good options. You can watch that video here by clicking the link. As always, I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions, so please drop a comment below. And until the next one, come on you Spurs.